guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hi and welcome. So I'm going to tell you about the books I read in May. I just want to say in the beginning that it doesn't matter how many books you read. Like, if you read one book, that's amazing because you read one book at least. And if you read like 20 books, I'm glad for you because I couldn't do that. I didn't read that many books. I read 4 books in May, and now I'll just tell you about the books I read. Honestly, why does it feel like the first book I read in May is like a long time ago? Like, why does it feel like that? So I started the month by reading Hook, Line and Sinker by Tess Bailey, and it's the sequel to It Happened One Summer. And It Happened One Summer is about Brendan and Piper, and the sequel, Hook, Line and Sinker, is about Brendan's best friend Fox and Piper's little sister Hannah. It's kind of like Hannah is working at a movie company and they need to change the scenery for the movie they're shooting, and then she just comes up with the idea that they could film in Westport, so in the town where Brendan and Piper are living, because she wants to be closer to her sister and see her because they haven't seen in a long time. Brendan's parents are in town, so they don't have an extra guest bedroom, so Hannah decides that she can stay in Fox's guest bedroom. Yeah, I like the book. I didn't like the miscommunication that there was a little bit of, not too much, but I like the book a lot, and it gave me butterflies when I read the book, and I gave the book a 4 stars because I enjoyed it. It wasn't really a 5-star read, but it was definitely a strong 4 stars. And after I read Hook, Line and Sinker, I read The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. So it's a young adult book as well, and it's about Emily Hornby and Josh, and it's like the plot is that she's reliving the same day over and over again, and it's on Valentine's Day. She tries to fix such things she thinks. She tries to fix some relationships, etc., but it just doesn't work and she doesn't know what to do next. And meanwhile, she's been stuck in the time loop. She's like every day probably talk to the guy Josh, and then just can't obviously remember that she's gotten to know him so well. It was a nice read. I like her young adult books. Lynn Painter's I have read better than the movies, and I like the book better than The Do-Over, but I like the relationship between the 2 characters in The Do-Over, and I wasn't sure if the time loop thing would get too repetitive, but it didn't, thankfully, and it was kind of entertaining. It was kind of predictable, but I just don't care because it was a nice, easy read for me, and I like the book. I gave that book as well 4 stars. After those 2 romance books, I decided to read a fantasy book, so I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I actually have already read the Six of Crows duology, and the Shadow and Bone trilogy is kind of before the Six of Crows, but you can read the Six of Crows duology separately. And I have heard kind of mixed opinions on the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but I enjoyed the first book and I want to continue reading the trilogy. And it's about Alina Starkov, and in the beginning and in the end you get to know a little bit better Mal, who is like kind of her best friend, but she has a crush on him. They're grown up like in the same orphan home house thing. together because they're both orphans. And then something happens because she's a soldier and they are going to cross the shadow fold in Raqqa. So this is all happening in the Grisha verse, the same like universum that the Six of Crows book takes place, if I'm correct. They discover something about her, and the Darkling wants to take her into a safe place, so she needs to go with him because people are trying to kill her and everything. And then the plot twists just, they were there. I didn't see them coming, or kind of, but also not. I gave that book also a 4-star review because I liked the book. I want to continue this series, but I'm not sure when I'm going to pick up the next book, and that is Siege and Storm. And just a disclaimer, I have read 3 of the books on Libby on my phone, so I don't have physical copies, and one of them I borrowed from my local library and I've already returned it back. The last book I read in May was If He Had Been With Me by Laura Novlin, and I had such high expectations for this book. And it's about Autumn and Finny, and their mothers have been always like best friends, and now they're living in the same, like they're neighbors. So Finny and Autumn grew up together and have always been like inseparable, and they're been like always best friends through schools. But then in high school just something happened and they kind of just fell apart, and they haven't talked that much after that. And the book kind of has some heavy topics in it, so I would check the trigger warnings before reading it. But I had such high expectations for this book and I didn't like it. Like, I hated Autumn. I hated like she was the main character. I liked her, or she was okay, like probably the last 3 chapters of the book. And then Finny, I think he was okay. Nothing like major to say about him. The ending, it was just so random. Like the last sentences in the whole book, like, no, like what was that even about? Like, I just don't get it. I didn't like it. Yeah, I shedded a couple of tears in the end, but that was also because I was so confused. What the heck just happened? And then like, why couldn't it just kind of stop there? Why did the last like sentences or the last chapter have to be like, it was so random. I just disliked it so much. Maybe it just wasn't for me, but I disliked it. I gave it 2.75 stars because it's not like a 2-star read, but it's, no, actually I'm going to change it. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. But those were all the books I read in May, so in total I read 4 books, and that's probably not that many books for some of you, but for me it's pretty average, and I enjoyed almost all of the books I read. And then I picked kind of a massive TBR for me for June, and if you want to see what's on my TBR, you can check the video. I already uploaded it, and I hope we will see in the next one. Bye! But if I lay down and I play dead and I